KiwiSaver's down 10%. A lot of people have got negative balances again because markets have been very turbulent. They had 10 years basically of good returns. People that started at the start, because the balances were small, contributions were masking the market returns that they were seeing. So they weren't probably aware that in that period from 2007 through the GFC that the markets were actually losing money because they didn't see it in their balance.
What would you say that you do?
I do two things. I'm a chartered accountant and I'm also a financial advisor. So combine both and find that they work. They're very complementary to each other. But in New Zealand, it's quite unusual to find people that do both.
That is right.
There are chartered accountants who are financial advisors, but there's not that many that do both facets within a business.
Yeah, well, it got quite frustrating as a financial advisor back in the day to not know the answers to the clients and not being able to tell them the answers and having to find out call an accountant and ask. So.
Yeah, I mean, it can be, but you've also got to be very careful not to combine the two because they operate under separate businesses as well. So, and you've got separate regulations, separate regulators. So it does make it a little bit confusing, but.
Yeah, how do you do that? Like, do you have to take one? Do you change outfits and come back? Sorry, I'm going to be an accountant now. We've got to stick in this room.
It's a little bit like that. I tend to separate the meetings, so you'll have an accounting meeting, and then you'll get people come back and do the financial advice meeting. It's the normal way I do it. So there's two very distinct purposes to the discussion.
Do you charge separately on those two instances?
Accounting is charged like we normally charge for accounting. Financial advice is charged on the basis because, as you're aware, financial advice isn't as easy to charge on time and cost. People don't tend to pay for that. So, I think unfortunately in New Zealand there's I'm not sure that financial advice isn't always valued as much as perhaps it could be.
Yeah. What do you think that might stem from? Or do you think it's different in different parts of the world, or is it just universal? We don't.
I think it's different certainly in the UK, people will pay for financial advice. I believe in America they do too. I think it's just the way the industry's grown here, that the commissions and the remuneration structures that have existed in the past have probably meant that you rely more on putting the work in up front and then you get paid afterwards. And but that's going to change, and we've seen that in Australia already, where after the Royal Commission they got rid of a lot of the upfronts and the trail commissions and the servicing commissions and the things that people weren't aware were getting paid.
It's going to be interesting. Yeah, you make a point. It's almost as though people have conditioned to expect it to be free because the commission was paid by the provider. As opposed to by the client.
Well, the other thing was a lot of the big providers historically have always provided financial advice for free because they saw it as a way of building their books. And KiwiSaver, the banks used to have huge advice teams that were based off the back of building their KiwiSaver books.
So I see a lot of them exiting it now.
Most of the banks have exited advisory now. So
it's there's quite a lot of risk or challenge in it. What has been your perception of the compliance changes? And it makes sense in practice, and the delivery of it adds some complexity.
It does add complexity, but I think it adds some value for the consumer. I think it's meant that people can be more reliable. They know they're getting advice that's probably well thought out. And I think, the regulator does a good job. And I think, we need to, this is going to be a journey. I mean, we were very late to the party of being a regulated industry in New Zealand. Australia have had some pretty substantial regulations for years. And, the UK, you could almost argue, are over-regulated. America's regulated as well. And it means that, there are rules and things you have to follow. And it's just a matter of knowing what to do. I've always tried to follow the rules.
Even as a kid, young man, a rule break.
That might be a discussion for later. But as an advisor, there's a process you have to follow, and I think it's really important that process. It's probably for me now. It's just ingrained in what I do. So,
where do you think it sort of goes in the future? Like, I've seen some insurance people, for example, they charge $500 a year to say that they're not impacted by commissions. There's other people that, charge for a plan, or they charge for like a ongoing fee, but then people worry about, does that impact returns? And it seems to be a race to the bottom in terms of costs. Where do you think things are going?
I think it's going to be really difficult because with the banks exiting the advice business, it's becoming harder for people who have KiwiSaver balances particularly to go and find someone to talk to because, providers pay, they'll pay a trail on KiwiSaver, but that trail in most cases doesn't even go close to covering the servicing costs for over a year. But there's a lot of media that talk about, financial advisors overcharging and hidden commissions and things like that. So I am sort of probably hopeful that one day there'll be a lot more transparency around the fees. I have a policy in my business that I fully disclose all fees, so clients are well aware of what's getting paid. But I think unfortunately KiwiSaver, they need to. I think there needs to probably be a bit of a rethink around how KiwiSaver advice is paid for, because there are a lot of people out there who are doing, who are providing the advice, but I don't know that people are able to access it because they just can't either afford it or they can't, don't know how to actually access someone to do it. I mean, I heard yesterday, I was talking to one of my accounting clients who was telling me that they got phoned up. They've just turned 56, and they got phoned up by their bank and got suggested that they went into down their risk profile from growth down into a balanced or a moderate profile because they're now 10 years from retirement. And that was and then they said to them on the phone, well, let's just get the pay, let's just do it. I can talk you through the process. And they hadn't gone through the understanding their goals. They hadn't understood whether the person was actually going to retire at 65. They hadn't understood, you look at the markets currently. Is it really a good time to be moving someone wholesale from a growth to a less risky portfolio? So. So that sort of thing, unfortunately, is going to manifest itself, and so people need to know where to go. And I think the educational process for particularly KiwiSaver is really important. And there's some really good people out there that are doing a fantastic job with education now.
Yeah, and just on that, for people listening, it's like, think about if you had a house and it was worth $1 million, and suddenly it went down to say $800,000 in value, and then you rushed out to sell it, and then that was going to be your way to fund your retirement, and it was a house that probably isn't going to grow in much value over the next 10 years. So it's like they're crystallizing a loss, so they're selling assets that have decreased in price. One, they're missing out on the potential upside of growing their portfolio, and they might retire at 70 instead of 65 or even 57. You don't know because you never asked.
Well, you don't know what's ahead of you, so
that's crazy. It's tricky. I was talking. Oh, you go.
That's right.
I was talking to a guy that's trying to innovate in that space, and because on one hand, KiwiSaver is a set and a forget until key moments, and it's also a check in if the fund provider is doing something it shouldn't. As long as the fund provider is following fundamentals in investment, and most of them do, some don't, but I won't name them. I got in trouble for that. There's some strange investments, and they're just, for anyone that wants to know, not so much the name of it, but it's just a single asset class with only 30 equities. So it's just 30 companies. And there's, but anyways, his approach was client directed KiwiSaver inquiries that help facilitate a relationship to an advisor. I don't know if people would be engaged in that platform, but his whole idea was that you have the single source of net worth where they're all tracking and following their life and where they're at. And then they want a particular advice, and then they facilitate the relationship with the advisor, and the platform pays the advisor for their time instead of the actual person. But how do you think we solve that problem of KiwiSaver paying almost nothing to advisors but needing advice?
I think as KiwiSaver becomes more meaningful to people, and my judgment on KiwiSaver is that it becomes meaningful when your balance is roughly 1 year's salary, and then people then will get on the journey and start to realize, actually, my money I've now got a meaningful amount. And then when it gets to 2 or 3 times your salary, which for people that have been in KiwiSaver right from the start, people are probably starting to get to that point now. It's just about, I suppose, people understanding that there are advisors out there who can help them, and people being prepared to say, well, actually, my KiwiSaver balance is worth this much today. Maybe some guidance to get me to the end point might be a good investment or good use of time. I always used to describe it to people that, if I took you out into the street out here and I said to you, find your way to Whangarei, you could probably do it. If you had a blindfold on, you could probably find your way. You'd ask people and they'll say, I'll go that way, I'll go that way. But if I gave you a map and some checkpoints along the way, you're going to get there a lot better and you'll probably end up in a better position.
That's a good analogy.
And that's how I describe it to people. So it's about giving you the checkpoints along the way if you want them. Some people don't want them, and give the guidance that you think, because markets have been very, very temperamental in the last 3-4 years, and there are some. I'm a believer that you just ride these sort of things out, because they do come right. Markets have always do come right, but it's just the time frame where they do come right. And another analogy I use to people is the biggest determinant of the return you're going to get is how you react when things go wrong. Because typically people will withdraw or down risk. And those two things typically mean you've locked in losses and you don't have the opportunity to regain the gains.
It's such a huge thing. I use the analogy of like a boat. It's like, I've got this well-made boat. It'll get you where it's going to go. You're going to go through some rough seas. As long as you don't jump off, you're fine.
Exactly. Yep.
It's tricky. My concern was with KiwiSaver was so it started around about 2007, give or take. And there was, some tough times then, but for the most people coming after that, hadn't really experienced much.
No. Well, they had 10 years basically of good returns.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the other thing that impacted that was that the people that started at the start, because the balances were small, the contributions they were getting from the government, their own contributions plus their employer contributions were masking the market returns that they were seeing. So they weren't probably aware that in that period from 2007 through the GFC and then, the turbulence in the early part of the 2010s, they probably weren't aware that the markets were actually losing money because they didn't see it in their balance. Whereas when COVID hit, because the balances were so much bigger, straight away people saw the fact, oh, God, my KiwiSaver's down 10%. And this year, a lot of people have got negative balances again because markets have been very turbulent. The dollar hasn't probably been as reliable, and we've had a perfect storm the other way.
Which is scary, and I think that's the value. You see it in the advisors that have lasted the longest. That they're really good at setting expectation. So you see the advisors that don't last, they're like, oh, I'll get you this return. We got better returns than that. And then as soon as moments like this happen, if you haven't warned clients and said, hey, this could go down if you've got an aggressive portfolio of 30, 40%. If you got a balance, it could be 10, 20%. Are you mentally prepared for that? And it could take years to recover. But if you don't leave, you're fine. It's tricky. So what do you do in those moments? You got that call. They're like, oh, you financial advisor, you told me to get in it. It's gone down 20%. They're not usually like that, but some are.
Just listen.
Yeah.
That's all you can do.
Interesting. Is there a way you help prepare them for it, like in the initial consultation?
In most of my advice documents, I'm very overt about negative returns and what can happen. I talk about, I show them what a 3-year return will be, what the worst period has been over 3 years, and so they are aware. And it's as part of the risk profiling, I also make sure people are aware of the potential for negative return.
There's a good way to demonstrate. It's not timing the market, it's timing the market is a common thing.
Yeah,
and
correct.
there's a S&P 500, which you probably know, but most people listening might not. The 500 biggest companies, let's say, in the US. And they found over a 20-year period, if you just missed 10 days, so for 10 days you weren't in the market during the best trading days, so where the markets went really high, you lost about a third of the potential return. So you think about that, just you missed 10 days in 20 years and you're like, your return is, let's say it was like 8% and it was 5%, for example, something like that. It's crazy, eh? But then people try and, I know how to pick, I'm a trader.
Well, the other thing, is really interesting is if you look at the S&P 500, if you haven't held the top 7 tech stocks, you're pretty much flat over 4 or 5 years, because those tech stocks have actually driven the markets.
What's your view on things at the moment? Where are we in a recession?
In New Zealand?
Yeah,
I think so.
Interesting.
I don't know the stats will show there's a recession, but I think what I'm seeing from our accounting clients, what I'm seeing talking to people, it's tough out there at the moment. I don't believe that New Zealand has really understood the impact of the RBNZ's decisions and the impact it's going to have on residential mortgages and people's spending ability. I don't think people have actually fully adjusted to that yet. I think, there's a whole cohort of people that bought houses, and I do feel very sorry for, particularly a lot of the first home buyers who bought houses 3-4 years ago, who financed their houses through the bank of mum and dad. They probably locked in a mortgage rate of 2.5, say, interest only for 3 or 4 years, and those mortgages are coming up now. They were probably earning, if they were lucky, maybe earning $100,000 a year, which was comfortably servicing their mortgage, and they were living a good life. And now their mortgage has come up. They've probably still got $1 million mortgage, and they've got, suddenly they're having to find 7.2%, and they've moved from interest only to P&I. And, so suddenly their mortgage cost has gone from, say, $25,000 a year to, $70,000-$80,000 a year. And their salary won't have gone up by that much. And the chances are they're a negative equity in their property. And, the money from the bank of mum and dad is probably gone, and it's going to be very tough. And those are the people I've got a great deal of sympathy for. So yeah. I think, it's going to be hard. And then, of course, that's going to manifest itself, because suddenly, the consumer spending isn't down. I mean, it was amazing yesterday to see Mitre 10 come out and say they lost, I think, $68 million. You've seen the failure of Soupy. I've just got a horrible feeling. I think this is just the start.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, I was helping some clients a while back where they were like 2 great incomes, and they're in their early 20s, debt free at 65. You know what I mean? Like, and I was working off a 7% just to be safe. Assume mortgage rates are 7% on average, just like the bank does. But I was still, and I'm like, hey, this is really important debt. You got to pay this down as soon. And they're like, well, I can do this. And I'm like, oh my God, this, because it's like done like a $2 million. It was, and then you're right. Yeah. So people fixed a few years back, and now all it's coming off. And then also there's a lot of redundancies I'm seeing. A lot of people getting fired because businesses aren't making money.
Yeah. I think we're in for a very tough time in the next 12, 18 months. And, I think the incoming government are going to have a very tough job to manage that. So.
Yeah, we brought government in this account.
Yeah.
Let's do a slide step. No.
Yeah, no, I don't want to talk about that.
No, I've never had any content not piss someone off when I talked about government.
Yeah. No, but I just think it's going to be, I think the environment, and people just need to probably tighten their purse strings where they can, tighten their belts, and, just ride the wave out, because, this isn't an unusual event. It happens all through history, right? I mean, I can remember when I bought my first house, I was paying 16-17% on my mortgage. I saw someone who's maybe, I'd say he's 5 years older than me, and he sent me a photo of his first mortgage document this morning, and he was paying 24.5%. And I looked at his repayments, and they weren't, I looked and I thought, that's a frightening amount of money, because this was in the 80s, right? And he would have been a young guy starting out who just bought his first house. I think he was paying $700 a month in mortgage payments. So it doesn't sound a lot. But when you put that into context of what he would have had to front for his house and what he was probably earning at that point in time, it's probably not out of the reality of today's world either. So,
yeah, that is nuts. Like, to put in perspective, I don't know how to work it out in my head, but the rule of 72 is how long it would take for, let's say, that mortgage to double if you didn't pay it.
Yeah.
So it's like, what, between 3 and 4, let's say, years before it would double.
Yeah.
That, like, I don't know how to conceptualize the $700 a month, but, like, when you think about it like that, that's crazy.
It's big money, and, but, yeah, I think it's just, I just don't think we've actually appreciated as a country how much the impact the mortgage shock is going to have, and it does worry me.
What is your thoughts on property? Because that's often where we have to steer people away from, is property in the bank.
I don't talk about property. I just think that's a decision people need to make. I'm not a big follower of the property market, so I do think New Zealanders are over exposed to property in general. I think it's been a historical thing because it's had such a great, it didn't have capital gains of any form. It hasn't had, it's always been a very attractive investment proposition, and people that have bought rental properties over the years have done very, very well. Rental, commercial, whatever, they've done very well out of them because property generally rises in line with inflation. So yeah, I mean it's part of a diversified portfolio would be my view.
Well, how do you direct? Because I see a lot of people manage funds for the most part. If it's well managed and you had the appropriate mixture of assets to achieve a certain time horizon, it's credible for a lot of people. Did you have moments in time, whether it was 2000, 2003, or the GFC, or finance companies 2008, 2010, where you had to talk people off the cliff or compete with higher returns somewhere else?
The worst time I can remember would have been, sorry, I can't remember the exact year, but it would have been probably after the GFC, because markets went down very slowly and people couldn't see the bottom. And when the bottom came, it came very quickly, and then the market recovered extremely quickly. And that's typical of what happens, that, markets fall and then you get a sharp recovery. And we also saw that last year when we got the COVID recovery and markets just went nuts for 12 months basically. And we've had 2 negative returns in August and September, and October's probably going to be negative as well. So that will be 3 negative returns for the this year. But overall, people are highly positive because you've had some pretty good. Even I think you had a couple of months of double digits in the year. But the difference I found at that time, and there's been a couple other times, the Asian financial crisis was another one, which impacted markets in this part of the world. And the markets fell very slowly, and I sort of, the analogy I use is it's like cutting your finger off and doing it. That was like cutting your finger with a piece of paper, and we all know how painful a paper cut can be. But if you just got the knife out and went like that, it would have been a shock. But then it would have, and that's what that felt like at the time, because you came to work every day and you just, it was just more bad news, and that went on for 18 months. And people were just, couldn't see the bottom. Whereas when you've had these sharp declines, you get to the bottom a lot quicker, and then the conversations are then about, the recovery, and you can use the data to show, that recoveries do happen, and they always happen. So.
Has there been lessons around that as you've, done advice for a longer period of time, like mistakes you did at the start, whether it was not setting good enough expectations or getting better at explaining the downsides, or getting better at acquiring business? What has been your lessons over the years?
I think the biggest thing is just don't overpromise on returns. It's, you just make sure that people are aware that it's a long-term thing, and make sure that they're aware that things can go down. And, that's probably the two key things for me. There's nothing, it's markets will happen, and as an advisor, you can't control those. All you can control is help guide the person to make the best decisions they can make at that point in time.
Do you think, I've been thinking more about what actually advice is, and I see it as finance is just an excuse to be a life coach, which sounds a bit, people don't like calling themselves life coaches, but I see, you talk about money maybe a little bit, because a lot of your clients, at least I find, are ones that aren't interested in finance. They just want to know it's fine, and then you talk about the weather or whatever the fuck. But then there's moments in their life where they're like, who do they call? Who do they trust? And who's going to give them the advice to get out of it? Like, I use the example of a client's partner had dementia. We knew it was going to happen. She was looking after him, but then suddenly she had to put him into care. And she's like, what do we do? And I'm like, well, it's going to cost about this much a week. We already planned it in your plan, because you got to think like that. You got to think like, what's going to happen and how can we conservatively protect it? So what do you think the value of advice is, in your opinion?
I think it's just about helping people make the right decision at time. I mean, a conversation I'm having with people now, and I suppose it's about age and stage in life, right? You're starting to have people involved in your life that don't make retirement for whatever reason, and you're also talking to clients, and you go through stages where you're off to engagement parties, and you go to weddings, and then you go to 40ths, and then you start going to funerals and all that sort of thing. And it does give you a bit of a reality check, and it makes you realise that you actually need to sometimes live life in the present. And if you've got to enjoy things when you can, and during COVID, you saw people who had retirement plans greatly disrupted, who then suffered, whatever reason, their health deteriorated, and found they couldn't do the travel that maybe they wanted to do, and they couldn't pursue those dreams they had. And then you think, well, actually, if you'd done those earlier, hindsight's the best thing that can ever happen, right? And you don't often make decisions badly in hindsight, or with hindsight. But you also, I'm a big advocate of encouraging people to actually, use their money while they can, with the understanding that it's about knowing that they're going to have to make adjustments as they go through their journey, and that's part of what you help them do. So you might have the capital to retire on 40 or 50,000 a year, but if you want to, between the ages of 65 and 75, move that up to 70 or 80,000. As long as you know that when you get 75, you're not going to be able to do the trip to Europe and the pointy end of the plane. But when you've got your health and you've got your motivation, your energy, and all the rest like that, get on that plane, go and travel, go and pursue your dreams, go and do your goals. I mean, I was talking to a guy I work with in Australia yesterday who was telling me about a really good friend of his who had all these great plans, and he went to the doctor, and he came out with a diagnosis of motor neurone disease, and has probably got a lifespan of 3 to 4 years now. And suddenly all that stuff that he's worked all his life to do has come to an end. And that's the sort of stuff that you can't control. But I am a big advocate for people and say, well, if you want to go and do something, go and do it. It's not something that the old adage, you hear, and it's something I remember I got told by someone very early on when I very first started out as an advisor at the start of the 90s. The best form of financial planning is when your check to the undertaker bounces. So. Yeah, and that's I just encourage people to go and pursue your dreams and aspirations is what I try and do, and I view my job as helping people achieve those goals, dreams, and aspirations.
It's interesting, that we sort of turn into spending advisors, which kind of goes against the way that you're remunerated. If you think about it too, it's like we tell them, hey, enjoy your money now, because we know the consequences of seeing people not enjoying those moments, and saying, hey, spend a lot more now, because you won't be able to spend it after this age because you can't enjoy it. How do you instill that, let's say, in a new person, where it's like, hey, you're remunerated from the amount of money that person has. Also, you need to tell them to spend it to enjoy their life. How do you hold those two spaces in your head?
I never think about the remuneration. It's about the first and foremost thing is what's right for the client. And if you can't align that, with an absolute laser vision, then you shouldn't be in the industry, is my view.
Yeah. Fair.
I just think that's, your client has always got to come first. And if it means that, you're not going to get paid as much or, so be it. It's just the way cookie crumbles, because your job is to give the client the right advice for them at that point in time.
Probably end up getting paid more as a result because you care more about people.
I never think about that.
Yeah. How do you help people discover their goals?
Just a conversation.
Yeah.
I normally go into my first meeting. I don't even take a piece of paper with me when I meet people for the first time. Let's just sit and talk about what you want to do.
Interesting.
And just understand it.
Have you learned any lessons around like how to help people feel comfortable? I know you do a lot of intuitive understanding, or was there things you had to overcome, like limiting beliefs around money or things?
No, I mean, I was lucky. My parents, always instilled the thing about money and being careful with money in me. I mean, it's probably a generational thing because my parents, lived through the war. My father was, he was, when the war ended, he would have been 10 years old. So, and my mother would have been, she would have been 6 or 7. So that austerity period that happened really did instill people the importance of, just being careful. And that got instilled in me and my sisters at a very early age. And, then you sort of see what your parents do in time and how they live, and you realise that, money, there can be times in your life where money is very difficult. And I certainly saw that in my, in my life. And I think it's just about making sure that you understand that, but also take that on your journey with you. That yes, money is hard earned, but I also have a belief that if someone comes to me with $1 million or $100,000, they're deserving of the same type of advice, because the person that's got that 100,000, that amount of money is just as important to them as the money the person that's got $1 million is, because that's what they've got to live, and they've got to live their retirement on. So, it doesn't, I mean, I started investing in shares when I got my first paper run in Palmerston North, and I used to go, it was a funny old thing, you'd go to the newspaper office. I used to bloody ride around Palmerston North delivering newspapers for the Dominion Post, or the Post, Evening Post it was at the time, and then the Evening Standard. And then you get paid and you get this little brown envelope with some cash in it. And I used to go down to the building society and put my money in a hole in the wall. And I mean, I would have been 13, 14 then when I was at Palmerston North Boys High. And I used to, stop off at the sharebroker's office on my way, because I sort of got to know them through my grandfather. And I'd go and chat, and I'd buy some shares in BHP, and that's how I started. And
did you go well, or did you lose it all?
No, I've still got them.
You still got them?
Yeah, 40 years later, still got them. So it's not 40 years, 30 years, 35, something like that. I don't know.
Jeez, wow.
Yeah, I've still got those. Did you?
Yeah. I was in Vernon.
Yeah, I can't remember what I think I was in.
Did you do the marching there?
Yeah, I think I was in Gordon.
Gordon,
the light blue. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great school. I still think it was probably the best school I went to, and there was some great teachers there that I had. The three that stand out to me was Eric White. Was it Eric White? The director, Errol Brookie, and Ian Cahoon.
Ian Cahoon.
They were the three people that were sort of running the school. And Eric White was, he was a phenomenal man. He, unfortunately, I think he played Davis Cup for New Zealand in tennis. And I've always admired what he did and the way he dealt with people. And he's that's the reason we're very old school, and probably some of their methods wouldn't stand up in today's world. But the thing they instilled in you was respect. And I mean, it's interesting. You remember Ian Cahoon as well.
Yeah.
But I remember going back to Palmy. It would have been 10, 15 years ago now. And I was walking in. I was in Countdown or Food Town, I think it was at the time, in the plaza. And I walked in down the aisle, and I was just wearing. I'd just gone in. I was staying at my parents-in-law's place, and I'd just gone in, and I hadn't actually made any effort to go because that's just the way it was. I had my shorts and t-shirt on, and I just thrown on a pair of jandals, and I had my socks down around my ankles, and I heard this booming voice through the aisle, "Proctor, pull your socks up." And I turned around, and it was Errol Brookie. And after all those years, he remembered me.
Wow.
And I thought that was just very, very cool. And I had a chat to him and told him what I was doing. And he was, I mean, I don't know, but I mean, he did clearly remember me, but he shows a real empathy and a real interest in what I'd done in my life. And yeah, it was a cool moment.
Yeah, that's right. It's crazy how much an impact of someone believing in you more than you can believe in yourself can have, or someone taking the time to care. Had there been other mentors in your life, or lessons you've learned? What would be things you've learned? And
I look at some of the bosses I've had in my life, and I've had some
good and bad.
Good and bad. But I've had a couple that I think I think about, and I don't know if I should name them or not, but there was one guy I had who just absolutely showed unwavering belief in me, and he encouraged me to be the best I could be, and he backed you in every decision you made, and even if you got it wrong, in public he would always say, but then you'd get that tap on your shoulder, say, "Oh, have you got a minute?" and you get taken into a room and have a discussion. But it was always done in a very respectful way. And he's an incredible guy, and I still keep in touch with him now. After all these years, and probably the first partner I had, and when I started out in accounting, has been a huge influence in my life. I still keep in touch with him now, 30 odd years later. So they're probably the two key people, and obviously the other, my mum as well. She suffered some I don't know whether hardship's probably the right word for it. And just seeing the way she got through that, and the resilience that she had at the time. So
you've alluded to a few things, huh? but maybe we won't bail it. Maybe we won't.
I'm happy to talk about stuff. Maybe some stuff I won't talk. I'm pretty much an open book anyway. So
as you cross your arms as soon as you talked about it.
No, it's all good. No, I'm happy to talk about it. But no, it's just there've been a number of people in my life that have been really influential, and of course the other one is my wife, and I've been married to her for 20 odd years. God, she'd kill me if I couldn't remember, but and she's been a huge influence as well. So
wow. You can clip this, send it to her.
Well, she's she's got a complete opposite personality to me, and we joke about it that at work she's incredibly tidy. You go to her desk and there's nothing on it, and my desk is just covered in paper, and it's terrible. But then at home we're the absolute diametric opposites. That I'm quite tidy at home, and she's just got stuff everywhere. So
random. What do you on the marriage front? Because that having a marriage for that long of a time, and still speaking highly. It was funny. There was a study where they were recording couples, and they could determine with 94% accuracy whether a couple would end.
Right.
And it was based on, if they pointed out something, the other one would be supportive of it in the sense of, "Look, a bird. Oh, where's the bird?" And then they turned into each other as well. Like they would be interested.
Yeah.
What do you think has been quite helpful, your lessons through the 20 years of marriage?
Just say yes.
Just say yes, dear. Sorry, dear.
Yeah. I think it's just, be encouraging and do what you can do, but find things that you enjoy together. I mean, we love travel. We don't have kids, so it's enabled us to travel. So we do that. We do try and go overseas at least once a year, and I think that's very healthy and gives you a good perspective. We've seen some really cool places and done some cool things, but it's just about, finding those things that you can do together and enjoy them.
Do you have like rituals of you have a date night, or do you have, or even just like communicating boundaries, or no, just flow, just travel once a year. I'll see you next year, honey.
No. I think I've got to be careful because
yeah.
Greta will listen back to this and think, oh God, But no, I just think it's just do what you can do and be encouraging and try and do stuff together. I mean, but we've been so busy with the business over the last 2 or 3 years, we probably haven't had that time. But we still found the time to go and travel, and I think it's useful to do it because it enables you to just connect a little bit. And I had we've done a couple of trips subsequent to COVID, and one of them actually worked out quite beneficial because I actually got COVID right at the end of the trip. I didn't even realise I had it, and went to do my test to come home. It was the last day you had to do the test to get back to New Zealand, and I tested positive, and I actually ended up getting stuck in the UK for 5 weeks because I couldn't get flights home. And it meant that we actually had to very quickly pivot, and I had to run the business from over there, and which actually worked really well. But it meant that I actually got that period of time to disconnect because I hadn't planned for it. So,
Interesting.
And that was good. And I think and then we repeated that this year. We went up to Europe this year. And then went back to some of my childhood places, and that was. It was also really good because once again, it's just that opportunity to completely. And we actually ended up in Northern Europe, and I didn't realise, or I hadn't even thought about at the time, that internet might be a problem, and I actually couldn't get on the internet for 10 days. So I wasn't actually able to read my emails, and I was just relying purely on my phone, and it actually meant that you had to disconnect because you couldn't do anything, and that was actually really good.
Yeah, essential. Do you ever on that front, like so? Most businesses I see have a job. There's some level, especially at the one-man bands, like there's some level of needing to control or not to delegate. Because you've got 9 staff now, so you've obviously reached a certain threshold that not many advisors have. Accountants, yeah, but even then, it's quite rare. So what has been your journey in the leadership front, or is it something that your wife does really well? Are you in business together, I assume?
Yeah, I mean, my wife runs the place, so I always tell people she's the boss.
She's the boss.
And I think it's clear. I think it's important that we have that ability that, she does make the decisions, and it's.
So what would be? Are you like more visionary and she's more operationally?
No, I'm a doer. She's an absolute grafter.
Okay.
She'll do anything. But it's about trying to play to your skills. And I've managed big teams, and I've managed small teams, and we have 9 people involved in the business. Not all of them are directly employed by we use contractors as well as employees. So, but I think to me it's just about the question I always come back to, and this comes back to your question about bosses, is how would you want to be treated if you're in that same position? And that's my sole measure of, if I was in that position myself, how would I want to be treated, or how would I like to have been treated?
Yeah, fair, simple. All right, well, we've done a solid 44 minutes, mate.
Wow,
Flow through it.
Only seems like 5.
Yeah, good man. Well, I think it'd be interesting on the financial side of things. Sort of emotional, like behavior lessons. Like I noticed that whether someone's earning $500,000 a year or 60 or 40, often their spending habits are behavioral, or tips around the idea of how to approach investing, like maybe a diversified portfolio that's tax efficient. Like what are some advices that you've learned?
I think it comes down to people's personal beliefs. I mean, I always take the time to try and find out if people are, if you're dealing with someone who believes in has clearly got an interest in stuff. I just say go and open an account online and just put some money in every week and play with it, just see what you can do. Use that as your passion and your interest. And, some people, they like it, others don't. I mean, I've got a guy I talked to, and I mean, he was a compulsive spender. And so I set him up on this on the platform, and I said to him, every time you go out and buy a coffee, go and buy some shares in Starbucks. And every time you want to buy a takeaway, go and buy some shares in McDonald's. And, and we linked his spending to the thing. And then, I caught up with him. Well, we never actually worked together. I mean, it was just something I said to him. And then I caught up with him a couple of years ago, and I just said, how's that little share portfolio going? He said, you wouldn't believe I've got over $30,000 in it now. And it's just something I just thought, it will show him just sort of the amount that actually, and he's now he's not as frivolous with spending as he perhaps used to be, but he's actually got something on the other side of the ledger now that to show for what he did. And it's just about, for me, it's about finding something that appeals to people's personality and interest. Yeah.
Well, it makes sense. There's a book, Atomic Habits, where it's like you already have a habit that you do, that's good and consistent, and just link it to a habit that you want to improve. So it's like you've associated his bad spending with investing in his future, and he already takes that action. So it's a lot easier to direct the ship than stop and start.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. Is there anything else that you find is quite helpful for thinking about with your retirement? So you're in your retirement, do you say pay off your debt first, or what's your...
Yeah, I mean, I try and get people to get to the point of when they retire, they're debt free. I think that's really important. The other thing I always say to people is, in the year before retirement, plan to replace those big items that you want to replace. So if you want to do your car or the whiteware in your house or do a renovation, get that done before you actually retire, because psychologically those things are easier to do when you're earning than when you've stopped. Because if you stop, then you've got a finite pool of money. Whereas if you're earning and then something goes wrong, you still got the ability to say, actually, I'm going to carry on for another year if you need to. So I find that type of thing helps give people a bit more control. But, it comes back to what I said at the start. It's at the end of the day, it's the client's money, and it's up to them to do what they want with it. And it's up to me. My view is to try and guide them along the way and help them reach their end goal, which, might be retirement. I mean, in New Zealand, we're very lucky that we do have universal super, and, for a couple, it can provide a meaningful amount towards your retirement. And, there are a number of people who live on their super, and that's all they live on. But, fortunately, we're going to start to get to the point where people who've invested in KiwiSaver are going to have meaningful amounts of money, which they're going to be able to use to supplement their retirement. So, retirement in New Zealand is going to become, I think, for people that have had the help and the guidance, it's going to become a lot easier.
Yeah, huge. Yeah, the conscriptive saving.
But, that's going to come down to, super and the funding for that. And, I think Michael Cullen setting up that fund he did was, I think we're going to look back in history, and that's going to be one of the key moments, I think, in New Zealand, in the ability to help secure people's financial futures.
Yeah, every client under 40, I'm just like, let's just plan that there's no super. I don't know if there will be, but I don't know how you're going to pay for it with all the.
It's interesting. I mean, that's exactly the view I take. I've got three bands. I say to people, if you're 50 and over, you can probably be reasonably confident you'll have it. If you're 50 to 40, it'll be around, but in some probably a means or income tested form. And then 40 and under, you probably should be planning on just being do your best. There'll be something as a backstop, but that will probably be because the demographics are going to change to the point where I mean there's better people than me that are equipped to tell you the demographics, but you're going to end up with a lot more people retired than there are today that are being funded by fewer people working. So,
yeah, living longer.
Exactly. And we're living longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's going to be interesting. I'll let you know. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, you've done your first podcast, mate.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on.
That's right.